you stop! Fly, Jason, fly!
Hello there, boys and girls. Max Scoville here for Rev3 Games. If you guys have been following our coverage over the course of the last year, you should be well aware that Far Cry 3 is a game I have been eagerly awaiting, and it's arguably the last big game of 2012. Is it as fun as my shirt? Let's find out.
God, I haven't done Sambuca since I was 20 years old.
In Far Cry 3, players take on the role of Jason Brody, who's basically your average, unmotivated, 20-something rich kid douchebag from Los Angeles until he and his friends wind up held hostage by a bunch of crazy pirate slavers on the Rook Islands in the South Pacific. Jason escapes and hooks up with some of the Rakyat natives who are fighting a war against the pirates. The Rakyat leader, Citra, gives Jason a set of tasks that will put him on the path to becoming a warrior and subsequently rescuing his friends. I don't want to dwell on the story too much because it's best experienced firsthand. I will, however, say that the overall premise isn't particularly unique. At a glance, it's a tropical island adventure story bearing some pretty obvious similarities to movies like The Beach and 6 Days, 7 Nights, but between a cast of colorful rogues who play their parts extremely well, a handful of dark moments, and some extremely weird psychedelic shit, as well as the nuanced character progression in Jason Brody, there is a surprising amount to take away from the narrative. But let's be realistic here. The real reason I wanted to play Far Cry 3 is so I could set a bear on fire, shoot a Komodo dragon in the face, and ride away on a hang glider. Did I do all of these things? Yes, I did all of those things, and lots more. Far Cry 3 is a massive, sprawling world set over 2 huge islands with a big emphasis on exploration, but at its heart, it's also a solid first-person shooter. Weapons can be taken from enemies and can also be purchased from vending machines scattered around the island, but they'll also be made available for free when you activate radio towers. These are similar to the viewpoints in the Assassin's Creed games. Each radio tower is a unique bit of puzzle platforming, and when you reach the top, you reveal a section of the map. Most of the weapons can be modified for a price with attachments like extended clips, scopes, and silencers, which are extremely helpful when trying to keep a low profile. There's also the option to decorate your weapons, which is completely pointless, but is a great example of how Far Cry 3 just kind of lets you have fun. Why would you want a red tiger-striped grenade launcher? Because it looks cool, obviously.
See anything you fancy? I like the red ones myself.
Far Cry 3 isn't just about shooting bad guys, though. Some of it's about shooting animals, because you need to make belts, pouches, and wallets out of them. In a lot of games, hunting is just sort of a thing that's there for you to do if you feel like it, but in order to carry more than 2 guns and $1,000 at a time, you're going to need to kill a bunch of animals. I know some people might get upset by having to disembowel some poor tapir, so it's probably worth mentioning. There's no way around it either. You can't just buy ammo pouches or leather from stores, you have to go out and kill animals for it. But hey, that's what it takes to become a true warrior.
You are worthy of the tattoo.
Worthy to walk the path of the warrior.
In addition to leathercraft, you'll also need to do a bit of jungle alchemy, though it's less of a requirement. There are plants scattered around the island that can be used to make different types of syringes, healing obviously, as well as stuff to improve combat, hunting, and exploration. You can heal manually, but it'll take a few seconds, whereas using a healing syringe will instantly replenish your life. Now, I know that I said Far Cry 3 was a kick-ass first-person shooter and then started listing RPG mechanics, but bear with me. The overarching theme of the game is Jason's transformation into a Rakyat warrior, and this progression is implemented by 3 different skill trees. Each one's supposed to be focused on a different playstyle, but I never felt limited by the choices, and you're free to cherry-pick as you wish. Probably the most interesting skills are the takedowns, which are basically just melee kills done to any enemy who isn't looking at you. You eventually can string them together and do cool stuff like throw one dude's knife at another. Each skill is represented by a tribal tattoo, or tatau, which you see on Jason's arm the entire time in the game. When I first heard about this mechanic, I groaned because I don't like tribal tattoos, but it really works quite well in practice and actually plays a significant part in the story. Like I said before, Far Cry 3 involves a lot of traveling around the open world and exploring. Vehicles play a large part. The Rook Islands are littered with cars, jeeps, ATVs, jet skis, Zodiacs, and probably my favorite, hang gliders. There are also zip lines, and certain hillsides can be slid down quickly. As someone whose biggest draw to open world games is freedom and exploration, I was delighted by all these additions, but sometimes I do just want to get to the next mission, and thankfully Far Cry 3 has a fast travel system, which unlike Far Cry 2, isn't just a crappy bus route. It's probably worth mentioning that Far Cry 3 pretty much fixes every problem I had with Far Cry 2. Fast travel's a big one, but they've also removed jammed guns and, of course, malaria. If you are a fan of these quote-unquote realistic elements, you may be disappointed, but for most players, these are a welcome change. New fast travel points and weapon stores are unlocked by liberating enemy camps, which is done by going into the camp and killing all the dudes. Camps have alarms, so if you're detected by the enemies, they'll call for backup. It's easy to find yourself completely outnumbered, but alarms can be disabled, and if you're careful, all the enemies can be taken out stealthily, earning a major experience bonus. Far Cry 3 gives players a ton of freedom, and if you want to charge in guns blazing, that's fine, but I was surprised at how well it worked as a stealth game. Excluding a couple of missions that are automatic failures upon detection, Far Cry 3 does a really good job of incorporating stealth elements that add to the experience of the game instead of making it tedious. Far Cry 3's answer to Solid Snake's knocking on walls or Ezio's whistle from a haystack is throwing a stone. It's simple but pretty brilliant and can be used to distract enemies or lure them into a trap. Enemy AI is smart enough to pose a challenge but not omniscient, and it's lots of fun to mess with. A lot of enemy camps will keep dangerous wild animals locked up in flimsy bamboo cages, and if you shoot the cages open with a silent sniper rifle, the animals will run around and kill the bad guys for you without them knowing you're there. Dynamic fire also returns in Far Cry 3, and if you never figured it out as a teenager, burning stuff is lots of fun. Between flamethrowers, molotovs, flaming arrows, and the obligatory smattering of explosive red barrels, there's no shortage of fodder for the average pyromaniac. There's one mission where you're handed a flamethrower and told to go mess up the enemy's pot farm, and it's easily one of my favorite moments of gaming this year. It's just stupid, loud, exciting fun. I played Far Cry 3 installed on a 360 and it looked gorgeous for the most part. Obviously, current console hardware is being pushed to its limits, and if you get up close, you're going to see some assy textures and jagged edges, but you're not going to notice when you're soaring over a tropical island on a hang glider or setting a bear on fire. For the most part, it looks pretty good. Honestly, my only complaints about Far Cry 3 are to do with its save system and checkpoints. It's not terrible, it's just a little bit unpredictable, and places that you might assume are autosaves, like immediately after a long cinematic sequence, won't be. Also, right before the final set of missions, you're given a warning of whether or not you're ready for endgame, and I highly recommend everyone manually create a separate save file before then, because there are two endings, and if you're not careful, you'll have to replay the entire game to see them both. Of course, it's an awesome game, so you might feel like doing that anyway. I plowed through the single player of Far Cry 3 in around 13 hours, which isn't super long, but I also left about half the map unexplored. Aside from the story, there are also side quests and missions based on hunting, assassination, and collecting artifacts. There are also supply drops where you have to deliver medicine to a location in a time limit, as well as poker, knife throwing, and racing. That's only single player though. There's also an entire 4-player co-op campaign and a handful of online multiplayer modes. The co-op follows a quartet of hardasses who escape from a hijacked cruise ship and are looking for revenge on one of the neighboring islands to where the single-player campaign is set. It seems to follow a basic Left 4 Dead formula, except with pirates. I didn't get enough time with it to form a full opinion, but I applaud Ubisoft's effort to create a separate story set in the same world, and also for including local split screen. I didn't get any time with the online competitive multiplayer, which I apologize for, but it's definitely there. There's also a map editor, which is extremely cool, if for no reason other than to make ridiculous torture chambers for wild animals. I guess you can also make multiplayer maps if you're into that kind of thing. The single-player campaign is easily worth the price of admission, regardless of whether or not the multiplayer is any good. The online component is just more bang for your buck. In summation, Far Cry 3 is like a mix of all the best parts of Uncharted, Just Cause, Donkey Kong Country, Skyrim, and a mid-90s extreme sports-themed Mountain Dew commercial, except it's got a bunch of drugs and sex thrown in. The big open-world sandbox is a blast to explore, and the story is definitely worth writing home about, but most importantly, Far Cry 3 is a game that lets players have fun. Instead of slapping your wrists for getting weird, it hands you a flamethrower and tells you to set a drug farm on fire. I had high hopes for this game, and they were blown out of the water, like a shark shot with a grenade launcher. Overall, Far Cry 3 is one of the best games of 2012. It's coming in late in the race, but you definitely don't want to miss it. That's what I thought of the game anyway. If you guys have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them below. I will try and get back to you. And be sure to stay tuned to Rev3 Games for the rest of our Far Cry 3 and other video game gaming coverage. I will see you guys around.